Hello and welcome to another video from me, this tutor, and this time we're looking at the causes of the Cold War. We're going to look at a 16-mark question and see if we can come to a conclusion about what did cause the Cold War. Okay, so historians obviously disagree and have arguments about the cause of the Cold War. I've set you a statement question here that says that Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe is the most important cause, and we're going to obviously assess that. Okay, so firstly we need to obviously revise your knowledge a little bit. So looking back over the pages of the cause of the Cold War, and then we can have a look at a quick quiz, and then we're going to go through planning the answer, and as you can see on the pages and revision guide, we're then going to practice writing the answer. Okay, so let's just recap the knowledge first of all with a little quiz. Okay, so historians obviously disagree and have arguments about the cause of the Cold War. I've set you a statement question here that says that Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe is the most important cause, and we're going to obviously assess that. Okay, so firstly we need to obviously revise your knowledge a little bit. So looking back over the pages of the cause of the Cold War, and then we can have a look at a quick quiz, and then we're going to go through planning the answer, and as you can see on the pages and revision guide, we're then going to practice writing the answer. Okay, so let's just recap the knowledge first of all with a little quiz. Okay, so here are some quick questions for you to do as a little quiz. So have a look through the 10 questions, then have a look through the revision guide and fill in the answers. Maybe see if you can answer some without looking, and then fill in any answers of things you could not find, so you can have a bit of a recap of the cause of the Cold War. Okay, so you've got some answers already. So here's my answers then. So what was the name of the American law to keep the world free from communism? Of course, it's the Truman Doctrine. And how much martial aid was given to Europe to stop communism? So $17 billion. Which country tried to accept martial aid and then was taken over by a communist coup? Of course, that was Czechoslovakia. And name the Czech minister that was died in mysterious circumstances in 1948. So that was Jan Masaryk. What did USA, Britain and France do in Germany that caused upset to Russia? Okay, well, they planned to bring their zones together. Remember, obviously, Germany was split into 4 zones, and they started to bring the Western zones together with a shared currency. Of course, they wanted to develop Germany and make it great again for trade, whereas Russia maybe wanted Germany weak and to take things off them. So a division began there around Germany. So when did they put their zones together? In the West, well, this was March 1948. What did Stalin set up in response to martial aid? Well, Stalin did not want his countries to accept martial aid, so he set up Comecon. Now, there was no money attached to this. This was mainly economic support in terms of trading together and economic planning, like bringing in 5-year plans and bringing in collectivization of the agriculture. So they were sharing ideas. When was the Berlin blockade then? So because the Western zones have been put together, Stalin then thought, well, you should maybe leave West Berlin then in that case and let me have the East all to myself. And so he started the blockade of West Berlin to stop the Allies having access, and they started June 1948. So the Americans then thought, well, we will just keep supplying them with lots and lots of planes, and they set up an operation called Operation Vittles to supply food and supplies. What was the name of the famous airlift of April 1948? So they had a big airlift in April 1948, a real show to the Russians that West Berlin would remain free, and this was called the Easter Parade, where huge amounts of planes flew in over the Easter time period to supply West Berlin. And shortly after this, Stalin gave up and realized that West Berlin could not be taken. Okay, so let's plan our answer now and have a think about it. So if you haven't looked at other questions I've given around this, then let's have a quick recap of some of the skills we need to do to be successful in this question. Okay, so have a read through the question carefully and see if you can pick out some of the key skills you think you need to show to be successful with this answer. So pause me now and list some ideas. So here's my thoughts then. So obviously 16 marks needs to be 3 paragraphs. We need to explain in 3 Peel paragraphs. in those paragraphs, we need to make sure we have really good factor examples in each paragraph, so we're showing our knowledge to the examiner. And then we need to explain the impact of these examples. It's the most important bit, to explain why. For instance, why does Stalin's expansionism lead to Cold War? How did it lead to tension and arguments? We can be a little bit balanced with this, so we can do yes or no in there in terms of the impact. Try and explain widely if we can. Okay, so furthermore, this led to think about long-term, short-term, different people, different places to help develop that idea. As I've already said, we can obviously evaluate and give strengths and weaknesses in our balanced answer. And then we need to conclude at the end. But we should really be giving our viewpoint throughout. We should be saying things like, it's very important, it's partly important throughout. Okay, so let's plan this answer now. So you can see your next task is to come up with the different arguments. So think about what would you put for the different argument headings. We've got Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe. What would you put for argument 2 and argument 3 as your other two paragraphs? Have a think. Look through the pages of the textbook and revision guide. What would you put? Okay, pause and have a think about it. Okay, so here's my ideas then. So obviously I've got argument 1 is Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe, which is in the question. Okay, but what about other causes? So long-term ideological difference. So historians always talk about ideological difference being a really key difference here. Communism versus capitalism. Argument 3 could be the consequences of the sort of failed peace conferences. Okay, if you've looked at my question on write an account of Yalta and Potsdam, you'll see obviously there were some big long-term implications in terms of development of tension. So we could refer to some of those ideas. Now, so let's, you might have some different ideas, it's great, and obviously you can feedback some of those ideas, different ideas in the comments, help other students as well, that'd be wonderful. Let's plan these ideas, and obviously if you've got a different idea, plan your own idea and start coming up with some thoughts. So we don't need to just list knowledge about events, we need to list how these events led to Cold War. So we need to think about the impact of these events, how they led to tension and arguments. So start listing some ideas in the booklet. You can say anything that's really, really strong idea with a plus next to it, anything that maybe a weakened idea that actually it's not a strong idea could have a minus next to it. Okay, so away we go with your ideas now. Okay, so here's my ideas. So Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe. By 1964, the Long Telegram and the Iron Curtain speech made it clear that Stalin was turning Eastern Europe communist. This led to the Truman Doctrine, which of course was a doctrine that said we want to end communism. So that's pretty much a statement that's going to get conflict. In 1948, the killing of the Czech opposition leader and the Berlin blockade seemed to prove Stalin wished to expand communism. So aggressive communist policies there by Stalin. And that's obviously leading to ideological difference being shown through. But is ideological difference actually the most important? So argument 2. So we could talk about the long-term issues of ideological difference. You could talk about the Red Scare, the Allies trying to stop the communists in the Russian Civil War, not welcoming into the international community. There's that first page of long-term ideological difference where you could pick out some ideas from that. And of course, both sides did not fully trust each other. So obviously this led to arguments about the atomic bomb and the nuclear arms race developing because there was a lack of trust and they didn't really like each other because of these ideological difference. And finally, argument 3, divisions at the peace conferences. Of course, Stalin and the West disagreed about what to do with Germany. This resulted in the Berlin blockade eventually, which is the first and major event of the sort of Cold War, as it were. So really showed that division. And they also disagreed about free elections in Eastern Europe. Stalin thought he was creating a buffer zone, whereas the West thought he was taking countries and turning them to be communist. So again, arguments and division developed. Okay, so let's look at how we answer this question now. So here's a writing frame. It's in your booklet as well, as you can see. So firstly, Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe was quite or very important as a cause of the Cold War because. So you're going to make your point. You need to decide how important it is. So it says, how far do you agree with the statement? So we need to give an amount, very or quite important. Okay, if you want a slightly different way of starting your sentence, you could say, the statement is mostly correct because, or partly correct because, and give that idea. So we need to give a reason why at the end of it to really form an argument. Top candidates will give an argument and it will flow through their paragraph. Okay, so then you'll give some evidence to support that argument you've given. You'll talk about an event. Then you're going to say how this then caused the Cold War. Okay, so this meant Stalin's expansion led to Cold War because you can talk about the impacts, how different countries reacting, how they're starting to fall out with each other. And then if you think it's very important, you give a furthermore answer. If you think it's only quite important, you give a however answer. Okay, so let's give this a go now. So write your first sentence now. Set up your argument. So pause me now and create an argument. Look at the plan to help you. Okay, so here's my opening sentence. You might have different, but here's what I've got. So firstly, Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe was very important to the cause of the Cold War because it led to increased suspicion between East and West. Kept it very simple. Increased suspicion, increased tension, lack of trust. Any phrase like that would do. So, for example, pick an example from the list which you think shows real development of tension. Okay, pause and give it a go. Okay, so here's my example. For example, by 1946, it seemed clear to the West that Stalin was making countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary communist by expanding in Eastern Europe. Okay, you could say something like that. So give some examples of expanding in Eastern Europe. Okay, so how does this lead to the Cold War? So now what's the impact of this? This is the most important bit where we're going to get loads of our marks. So can we explain how this caused increased tension? Okay, we need some impact knowledge. Okay, so pause and look at the plan and give this a go. Okay, so here's my idea. So this meant Stalin's expansion led to the Cold War because the long telegram and Churchill's Iron Curtain speech led to the US president announcing the Truman Doctrine and martial aid to stop the spread of communism. This increased suspicion and division as Stalin felt that this was to stop communism and therefore banned Eastern Europe countries from accepting martial aid and gave them Comecon to control their economics. So now you have a clear division, capitalist and communist division to some extent. If you don't think that's clear enough, you could add that little sentence in there to make it a bit clearer. So now let's say link to another idea. So we're saying it's very important at the top. So we need to say a furthermore here, really. If you've said partly, then you need to say a however. Okay, let's give another idea. So looking at that table, and obviously we've got murdering of Czechoslovakians and forcing them to accept things. Perhaps that's where we need to head next. Okay, so pause and give this a go. Okay, so here's what I've gone for. So furthermore, this increased division as Czechoslovakia wanted to have martial aid. This led to a communist coup to seize power and the killing of the previous Czech Foreign Minister Masaryk. This convinced Truman that the communists were brutal and would spread communism with murder and violence, and obviously further convinced him of the need for Truman Doctrine and containment of communism. Okay, so I think probably be good if you've linked to the word containment in there as well. Okay, so there's a really good idea for a paragraph. So let's have a quick look at some of the other ones. So here's how you're going to set out your second paragraph. So long-term ideological difference, you need to choose how important it is and give a reason, give your evidence, and then explain how this led to the Cold War. So give yourself 6 or 7 minutes to write a paragraph and then come back and I'll show you an example answer. Okay, so pause now and give this a go. Right, so here's my example answer. So secondly, long-term ideological difference was very important as a cause of the Cold War because it meant that both sides were suspicious of each other. Okay, so suspicion grows. For example, the USA had been worried about communism for a long time as events like the Red Scare and opposition to communism in the Russian Civil War had shown. This meant ideological difference led to Cold War because neither side trusted each other in the post-war world. Truman thought Stalin was aggressively expanding in Eastern Europe, while Stalin thought he was creating a buffer zone against future invasion. You could link to Germany invading 3 times in recent years. First World War, Civil War, and Second World War, if you're not quite sure what those invasions were. This led to the Cold War as the Americans brought in the Truman Doctrine to stop what they thought was communist expansion. Okay, so that's fairly similar to what was sort of written above already. So it may be a nice clear dividing line with a furthermore. So furthermore, this led to the Cold War as neither side trusted each other about the atomic bomb as well. Truman did not share information about the bomb, and Russia began to make their own bomb as fast as possible. By 1949, the Russians had an atomic bomb, and the Cold War tension increased as the arms race began. Okay, so that's probably a nice strong argument now linked to the arms race, got that long-term idea. Okay, then last paragraph, in terms of the main three, we've obviously got the peace treaties, the Second World War. So again, think about how much value you're going to place on this. Is it quite or very important? Give a reason, give your evidence, explain the impact, how it led to Cold War. Here, I think we've got the Berlin issues we can link to, which are very significant in that first action of real tension and sort of East and West in conflict with each other. Okay, so pause and give this a go. Okay, so here's my idea. So finally, the failures of the Second World War peace treaties were quite important as a cause of the Cold War because their failure created opportunities for tension to develop. So, for example, we've got obviously Germany after the war was going to be split into the 4 zones, and Berlin was split into 4 zones. This meant Yalta and Potsdam led to the Cold War because the country disagreed about the unification of Germany. In March 1948, the Western Allies joined their zone together, and the Russians refused to unify Germany with their zone. This led to increased tension as both sides blamed each other, and Germany was split. So you could say a little bit more, like I did in my Yalta and Potsdam write an account question about, Stalin thought he was a conqueror and wanted to sort of ransack Germany and take from it, whereas the Western Allies thought they were the liberators and wanted to rebuild trade and relations. So you've got that difference, which is a bit of a however really as well, because it points to ideological difference as an idea. So furthermore, this developed into the Berlin blockade as the Russians tried to force the Western powers to leave Berlin. This increased tension as it was the first major international fallout between East and West. However, it is not the most important cause, as without the ideological difference and distrust that developed, then the peace treaties may not have failed. As I just pointed out a moment ago, they had different perspectives on Germany due to that ideological difference you could explain. So finally, we need to have a conclusion. So you need to give your view on how much Stalin's expansion in Eastern Europe was to blame. So your conclusion should start with, in conclusion, Stalin's expansion was very important, but maybe not the most important cause of the Cold War, because ideological difference was, perhaps, if you want to say that. And then you could explain this is because, by doing a bit of comparing of the different themes with their strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so this is if you've got time, add a conclusion, because if you have been very clear in your opening and ending sentences of your other paragraphs, your conclusion can be quite short because you should have already given lots of your viewpoints already. Okay, well, I hope that was very valuable to you and you got lots out of that practice question, and your knowledge of the cause of the Cold War is really improved, and again, you're clear on how to write the 16-marker question. The next task, of course, is to practice lots of them. There's more in the back of the revision booklet for you to practice, and making sure you can do them in a timely way. The rule is for people without extra time, it's the amount of marks plus half, so you should really be aiming for about 24 to 25 minutes to be successful with that question in a timely way as well. Okay, so do look out for more of my videos through the revision guide, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye for now.